Hello, everybody. Welcome to City Lights. Welcome to the Poetry Room of City Lights. And to those of you online, as always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ohlone people. Just want to take a moment to offer our respects to those who have come before us as stewards of the land. So it is always a pleasure to be hosting a City Lights author, because as you know, we're a publishing house as well as a bookstore. And to have Dagoberto Gilb here in person with us in the poetry room is such a huge treat, especially for this truly wonderful collection of book called New Testaments. We got a little surprise tonight. Of course, we have Oscar Villalon from Zyzzyva, and this is co-sponsored by Zyzzyva and ALTA magazine. And if you haven't checked out ALTA magazine, please do. It is all about California. And it's a wonderful, wonderful journal that comes out periodically. So Dagoberto's son, Roberto, is here with us tonight as a special guest, and he's going to be reading with us. But I'm going to, well, say a couple of words. First of all, Dagoberto is the author of 11 books. These include The Magic of Blood, The Last Known Residence of Mickey Acuna, Woodcuts of Women Gritos, and also the most recent one, A Passing West, which is a collection of essays. He's the winner of the Penn Hemingway Award, the Whiting Writers Award. He's also a Guggenheim Fellow. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in The New Yorker, Harper's, Best American Essays, O. Henry Prize Stories, and much, much more. So such a great honor to have you with us. And welcome to City Lights.
Well, thank you. Is this working? Hello?
Yeah, keep it really close.
It does work. Okay. Yes, thank you. I want to explain why my son Ricardo is going to read for you, because it has a little bit to do with me. It's also, you know, it is a pleasure that I'll get my son to read my own work. But I've been having other people read for me. One reason is because I think I get more pleasure. Who wants to hear me? When I write, it's not my voice. It's usually, often used to be my friend Danny Ochoa. And he was the character. That was his voice. And when I read, I think, this isn't Danny, it's me. But anyway, I'm doing this about a decade ago. I had a brain injury, I call it, and sort of have had trouble. And then recently my vision, I've had problems with this eye, so I have trouble seeing. And and then I went through another little thing, and I'm like, I can't read, I can't stand, I can't do any of this anymore. And then we decided I'd have friends read for me, and I just carry on after. And I realized that they're a lot better than me anyway, so it's all good. And having my son Ricardo do this is, you know, one of the big pleasures. The other thing I want to talk about with I have a disability. One of the things that when you get disability is you get one of those handicap tags, and you go, oh, and you go, yeah, because you get to park places, and so you never know you can never be sure. And I've learned a lot through disability, and this is one of the pleasures is to invite my son to come read for me at City Lights Bookstore. And the bookstore, which I want to say is the Notre Dame of our literary world of the US, is the best bookstore, the most well-known. I'd actually go further, but it might be more arcane and say it's a chart of bookstores. But look where you are. This is it. So, and here I am, and now my son will read from my new book. And when you buy it, I hope you do, I want you to, I can't sign very well, if very well isn't too extreme of a word. So, but I've stamped it, and I've done my best initially that with my own pen. It's sort of a little better than an X. It's supposed to be a D, but if it looks like something else, it's intended to be a D. But anyway, Ricardo, thank you.
I promise we'll get to the book eventually, but I'm going to say a couple sentences. I just want to say it's a real kind of an honor and a pleasure and an interesting circle of life kind of thing. But I mean, I grew up with my writer father, printing out books when I was 5 years old. Like my earliest memories are writing in books and him on the old keyboards and stuff. And just to think about how much time has gone by and how much life has changed, that here I am able to stand up in front of people and read in front of him his own words. Really a wonderful, wonderful feeling. This will be from the first story in the new collection in New Testaments. The story is Gray Cloud on San Jacinto Plaza. I was 9 or 10. My sister Lily was around 6 and my sister Rosie 5. And I do remember clearly that they were both wearing matching pink dresses and 2 shiny black shoes Mom bought at Fox Plaza, an old mall nobody went to near La Jeff, where she always said, on sábados, they had the best pulga with the best finds. They wore new white socks too. They had matching colas that I think were tied by ribbons, but could be other little girl thingies. They were happy all the time, except when they got in a who's was who's fight. Mostly, they got along with each other great. And that day, I say they were especially happy. I don't know why I don't remember anything my mom ever wore. Yes, I'm certain it wasn't the same cada dia. She washed all ours a lot, and there had to be her clothes in the piles too. My dad wore jeans and a short sleeve shirt every day, and this day was like any. For work, it was usually a t-shirt, but he also liked cotton ones with buttons, colored stripes or squares, no tails, untucked. He was wearing one of those that day. He had nice boots and work boots. He was a rock mason, but this day I say it was sneakers. Me, I don't remember. Had clothes on though. It wasn't a Sunday. We didn't always go to mass, but Mom told me we were good Catholics, and I took her word for it, especially on the good part. All 3 of us kids were baptized at Guadalupe Church in Alabama. Mom and Dad did get married in a church, black and white photographic evidence. My dad in a dark suit and my mom all pretty in a white dress with a veil. But I never wondered or asked where or who was there. I say that day in 77 or 78 was a Saturday. My parents said it might have been a weekday because sometimes my dad went on unemployment back then. It was a happy day though, because I remember how well my sisters were. And to me, I'm always me, but I was not unhappy for sure. We were at the edge of San Jacinto Plaza, at the northwest corner to be exact. That I remember exactly. San Jacinto was where most of the downtown city buses came and went. I especially loved them when I was younger. I also liked the Plaza Fountain because they said there used to be alligators in it, and there was a chance they were going to put them back in there again. Pretty thrilling past and future to me. Though I don't remember how we got there or how we got home. It wasn't by bus. None of us has any memory of why we were there or of any practical thing we did right after, like going home. That day, that Saturday or whatever, began what was like another time frame. The gray cloud came silently, or it sucked all sound into its quiet, or made it detour, turn off. Not a bird chirp, a tire squeal, a bus engine blast, a baby whimper, a dog yap, not a footstep. It wasn't hotter or colder. It didn't seem to be driven by any wind. It came toward us from where it could be Texas or Mexico or New Mexico, from that desert. The closer it got, the more it seemed we were moving toward it. From a distance, while it approached, it looked like a huge ball, but it was just gray air or gas or dust, a cloud that blocked seeing anything in it or beyond it. Once we were all caught inside it, I felt like I had no breath, or it was just that I was holding my breath. I couldn't see my mom or dad or sisters or anyone. I still think Dad must have said, "No se muevan," but I could have imagined that or even heard someone else say it. But I didn't move, as the voice I heard or didn't really warned me. I don't know how long this lasted. It could have been many minutes. It had to be a lot of seconds because I couldn't hold my breath long enough. I remember trying not to breathe deep when I had to. And then it was over, like a light switch turned on, an off-on blink. We were at the northwest corner of the San Jacinto Plaza, exactly, where the buses never stopped, but had. There was color again, red and blue, yellow and green, startling, like they'd been cleaned. My sisters were still in their pink dresses holding Mom. I cannot remember if they were sobbing or not. I think that's something that matters, but the truth is I just don't remember. My dad, later, pronounced that it was from a sarco, the copper smelter that was in the direction of where the gray cloud came from to the plaza and us. To me, a sarco was a giant red pipe stuck in the ground in the desert. My dad was told there was an article in the newspaper. I didn't know then that he didn't read. I mean, I never saw him read anything ever, and I never thought to ask if he didn't or couldn't. Though my mom liked celebrity gossip magazines in English and Spanish, we didn't get the morning or afternoon paper. Some more days later, my tia gave my mom a section of paper that had a small box about the gray cloud that passed through the center of the city. I was excited to see it because it was something from my life that made it into a newspaper. There wasn't much, a very small box that could fit in a wallet in one of the folded sides. It said, nobody knew what it was, and there were no reports of harm done, and a sarco said it wasn't anything caused by them. It didn't matter what the newspaper said. It was a big deal in our house. We talked about it a lot. What it was like coming, what it was like inside it, what it was like after, what damage it could or might do was in our rooms a long while. Any cough or upset stomach could be because of it. Bad sleep, a bad poop. My pops finally didn't like my mom bringing it up all the time, and after a while, but he couldn't stop her. Not that he tried very hard, he didn't. More like, ya con eso, but not loud, not demanding. No exclamation marks. He didn't say anything to me or us or out loud anyway, but I saw him listening whenever it came up, and I heard her get softer, shorter about it. He got that from her. She went on less for him. Me, I felt pretty much the same about it. Bad or nothing, but done. Yeah, it happened. I'm here, whatever. My sisters seemed the most affected. They'd get to babbling like, Mommy, do you think that anything might make our hair gray? Like abuelitas, but too early? Like before we get to middle school? That happened to a boy at Crockett where I was going like them. The boy had nothing to do with the gray cloud, except his hair change was some months after it. And so maybe that kind of grew on the side of his head. Or like, was the reason why the zancudos didn't bite them like they did all over to their best friend Julie next door? Was that because of the cloud? It went like this in our house for many, many months. Probably because of my mom. She dwelled on it the most, I think, or it seemed like it. Because even me, who I'd say didn't, kind of did. Maybe because of my mom, but I can't say for sure. It wasn't talked about the same way after a while, but it was there without words, without having to bring it up. It was always at the front of my mom's mind. We each heard it in her, saw it in moments that were supposed to be normal and usual, and would have been if she wasn't, I don't know, un poco loca? We worried. One day in the bathroom, I came out of the shower. I was beginning to dry myself off. Outside the window was what I always saw, a blue sky over everything, so close it shouldn't be called sky above, while below, where on the TV shows all of us in El Paso watched was supposed to be green lawn, shady trees, bushy hedges, delicate flowers, was the dry brown dirt where we lived. The neighbors across the street, that was asphalt like any TV street, lived Just like us, except here and there, they might have patches of grass barely growing or drying out, waiting on desert rain. My mom kept our yard free of stray grass and weeds. We had some cactuses and sage a few feet from our house in the front and visible side that didn't take any watering usually. Our only hose was in the backyard, where an almond tree still dropped nuts, grass beneath its shade and sharing its water. But this morning, my mom, a bucket of water beside her, was soaking a patch in the center of our bare front yard. She took a shovel and began digging a widening hole. I thought it had to be a grave, a burial site for a dog or cat, both of which often found meals or water near our back door left by my mom. But the middle of the front yard? Instead, it was for a strange-looking plant, the leaves thick, dull, oval-shaped, and long, that she dragged down the front steps. Big, as plants go, it was not a baby tree. Still, not what went in the center of a yard that was all dirt, or even a grass one. The dusty earth, wet now, did look a richer brown. Like me at the bathroom window, my dad silently watched her from the side of his truck. He was changing the oil. Like me, I could tell he thought it was a little off, too. I was there at the window so long, I dried without a towel. When my pops and I were in the living room, and my mom too, he let me know to be careful about what I might say. What she told us was that it was called a flor del cielo. A señora at the YWCA, where they had a bake sale once a month, gave it to her. It was very healthy, she claimed, for all of us, for our home. One night, some more months later, even a year, at maybe 3 a.m., those hours for sleep, I'd been having a long dream I couldn't shake. I was with some people I didn't recognize, but who I kept thinking I did. And I was supposed to drive. I didn't drive when I wasn't dreaming, even if I pretended to in my dad's truck. I was scared of getting in trouble and maybe dying in a bad wreck or killing someone else. So I forced myself awake. I must have made a noise. My mom had come. While I was dreaming, she was there. She wanted to know if I was okay. She was carrying a glass of water. I was thirsty, and it really tasted especially good. Of course I was okay, I assured her. It was a dumb dream. I didn't like the dream. It had nothing to do with that gray cloud, which to her, and I remember saying to her, or only to myself, Mom, it wasn't the gray cloud. But she wouldn't have believed me, but she wouldn't have said she didn't believe me. I was happy she was there, happy for the water, but as good as all that was, the gray cloud happened, and it lived with us. I woke up happy I had my mom. I had some friends who didn't, or some who didn't really.
And now our dearly beloved Oscar Villalon of Zyzzyva will do the honors, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, too, for coming out for this event tonight with Dagoberto Gilb. Before we begin, I just wanted to say, I think from the story that Ricardo read at the beginning, that gray cloud, I think from that story serves beautifully as a sort of as one of the major themes, I think, of your fiction, which is the impossibility, I think, of truly knowing where our lives go the way they do, what might have caused this to happen or that to happen. You have a fairly rough idea, but you really, truly never can know for sure. And I want to talk about that later. Hopefully in our conversation, we can get to that. But before we do, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your early life and your education. I think if anyone knows me at all in my thoughts about contemporary American fiction, I've always held Dagoberto Gilb's writing in the highest regard, and I consider him to easily be one of the best of his generation. And part of the reason for that is you could see in that section, you could hear in that section that Ricardo wrote. I think he is our bard of the blue collar. He elucidates the lower middle class, and he does through this whole thing, this exploration of the human condition through Chicanos and Mexicans and Mexican Americans. And in that sense, this becomes almost like his Yoknapatawpha County. That's to say, Los Angeles and El Paso, especially in parts of Mexico. He explores that territory, I think, with a intimacy and with an authority that very, very few writers have for their own backgrounds. It is the definition of the universal through the specific. And what I find so amazing about Dago as in terms as a practitioner, his art, I think his literary art is incredible, but how he got there. Because, we're talking about someone who, if I understand this correctly, Dominguez Hills in Southern California. You like sports, you're good at sports in high school, clearly very intelligent, but you really didn't care for class. Yet here you are. So could you talk to me a little bit then about that part of your journey? Oh, you got yours there, Dago. You can go ahead.
Well, okay. Dominguez is actually not where I'm from, but sort of Western and Imperial, which is now called South LA. It's where the Watts riots. It's about maybe half a mile from the beginning of the Watts riots in '65, and right at this little area where I don't know the number of the freeway, but that freeway the most recent freeway in LA used to be railroad tracks, and the tracks would go right on, and I'd go and you'd go along the dips, what was called the dips. And damn, I wish I could remember his name. A very important, he got a MacArthur grant, Black film director. Damn, I just can't remember his name. He grew up on the black part of where I grew up. It was near Washington High School. And so anyway, that's where I grew up. I ended up knowing people from Dominguez High because, long story. But I did not grow up with books at all. None. I had my mother, I grew up with my mother, who my father was a Marine, and they married apparently. And yeah, at some point I never saw him in my home. I knew he was a big deal because he was a Marine and he'd been to, World War II. And I was always, he was, a sort of Old Testament deity to me. That's about it. And my mother was a pretty woman who got a lot of trouble. She liked to drink and party, and she wanted to get married to rich men. So that was basically my life. And other than that, that was the Dodgers. I've watched the Dodgers a lot and wanted to be a pitcher and, all the things that kids want to do. But going to school was not among the things that I had any concept of. Sort of oddly, Vietnam was there. And it was like, do I want to go to Vietnam? And I'm like, maybe I should think about it. And I can go to junior college. And so I enrolled in a junior college, and that sort of opened the door for a world that I never knew existed. I was, pretty strong C student to D. I was really good at C's and D's. And I could care less about school, mostly less was the thing. I mean, there were girls and guys had cars and there were games, and that was it. I didn't grow up in El Paso. When I started living in El Paso, I think, had I lived in El Paso, when my best friend was Danny Ochoa, my little brother, same era, but I'd have been, flunked out. There's no question I flunked out if I were in El Paso schools in Texas. And in LA, they just would give me a D and move me along. And I was perfectly fine with that. That's how I felt. I felt equal to that. And I was happy. But I went to junior college, and damn, I knew nothing. And I loved everything. I couldn't figure out what major in because I loved everything. And I was a mess. So to make a long story short, I ended up studying because, you know, you would go through philosophy, you would go through business law. I learned about contracts, but I thought, no, I can't be a businessman. I did all the things you do, and finally ended up in a philosophy class. And whoa, this is where, you know what? Why are you fucked up? Well, these are the bigger questions. Where's the darkest spot when you go through it, and there's the end? That's the answer. They don't know. I want to go there. I want to hit the point where nobody has an answer. And so then I know where the question was beginning. So I ended up in studying philosophy.
Where?
UC Santa Barbara. I transferred. Why? Not for good reason. They had a riot there. I wanted to go I wanted to go to Berkeley. Thank God I didn't, because I wasn't up to Berkeley in the slightest. They didn't have, because I didn't even know you had to apply at a certain date. And thank God they didn't accept me to transfer there, because I would have flunked. I was just not up to Berkeley. It was enough for me to go to UC Santa Barbara.
When you're at UC Santa Barbara, you're in their philosophy and religion department. Is that correct?
Philosophy. Well, if you know philosophy, then you had to study Willard Van Orman Quine, you know, and I'm like, and then in religion, you know, so these are the late 60s, early 70s. It was like you go to religious studies class, and there'd be people, hippies in them, and there'd be dogs, and it was all kinds of fun. And it was like the deep questions of all the religions. I mean, every one of them. And so I mixed it immediately, because I didn't want to fully major in philosophy and study Willard logical positivism.
And so, and who are your teachers there at UC
Oh,
Santa?
well, eventually I did have a cast of incredible teachers. Edward Conza, I studied with Mircea Eliade. And I had a really close friend who ran the programs, and she liked me. We hung out, so I got to meet Joseph Campbell when he came for a month. And so I'd have dinner with these people, no less, and sit there like, oh, put my mouth in it. But Ivan Illich, I met Ivan Illich. I mean, utterly, the religious studies department was the place to be.
So from there, what happens? Because you don't, well, let me back up and say, what are you writing at any point while you were in college?
Well, I started, you know, it's funny, I started reading. I loved to read Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, no Americans. I didn't like Holden Caulfield. I thought, that's just a rich kid. Well, I don't understand him in the slightest. But Dostoevsky's characters I realized at one point reading Tolstoy, and I thought, we all go to, I think it was Kiev or someplace, and for your DACA, and you go and you play your piano. And I thought it was like a metaphor. And I realized one day reading Tolstoy, he was in a carriage. The character, I don't know which book it was, or it was a long story. I like stories then too. That he was waving goodbye to the cherry pickers. Mm-hmm. And I realized I'm a cherry picker. I see the boss drive up to the, I guess, I don't know if he's summering or wintering in those places they go to. I can't remember that part. And I realized, what is the story of the cherry pickers? Those are my people. When we're staying there, we're still picking the cherries that are so, they love so much. Right. And that's when I started getting into fiction. I gotta say, I read Kerouac and all these things like this. And I realized, Camus, I read Camus and, all the European, Kerouac, the only one. And what I will say that Kerouac did for me was making writing an adventure. That you went out in the world, Ken Kesey even. I thought Ken Kesey, Sometimes a Great Notion, was one of my favorite books ever. Yeah. It was really hard to read in the beginning.
And it's a great novel about work.
about people that work. Exactly. And yeah, and out in the world. It wasn't about, yeah, writing was about an adventure. And I immediately in my life, blank, blank, blank of years, and I get out with a degree and I think, oh, now what am I going to do? Well, I'm a pretty good athlete. I got a job in construction within 6 months. Good pay, a lot better than lots of jobs. I got good money. And I did that. And of course, I love my girlfriends, and my girlfriend had a baby and I had a son. And so, oh God, I have to make a little more money. I have to actually have a job that doesn't end all the time. And so that's how I began. I joined the union. I lived in El Paso for years, working, $5 an hour at that time. We're talking about the late 70s. That was good money in El Paso, $5 an hour. I remember working a year on a high rise. It was a high rise. What became in El Paso was a 3-story building on the UTEP campus. And I was starting my first novel and pretty much into it, pretty serious. It was about the Isla Vista riot that I was involved, and as a work study, I was involved with the Isla Vista City Council, Community Council, which were these hippies, but I got paid. Me and the mayor got paid because I had work study money and nobody else did. They all volunteered, and I didn't volunteer for anything. You didn't pay me, I didn't work. And so me and the guy, his name was Carmen, the mayor. So I did about a year. I would be their note taker at meetings where they'd smoke weed or drop mescaline or whatever it was. And a congressman or a senator would come in and we'd be high, and it was crazy times. So I went from there into the world of construction and started writing stories, which I loved, and just because I studied stories in religious studies, Native American stories, there's parables and things like this. And I thought those were better than novels. I liked Dostoevsky novels, but those kind of things, I didn't have, that kind of death experience. But, even Crime and Punishment, he's after the landlady, and he's worried about his sister being treated like a whore. And I went to St. Petersburg once years later. I thought, oh my God, that is such a story. It's still there. And anyway, my world about, and then I met Ray Carver.
Yeah, could you talk about that?
Well, I was at UTEP. I was working across the street as a carpenter with this guy Felipe, and Felipe didn't speak English, and he made $6 an hour. He had 5 kids, so I thought that was fair. I made 5, and I thought, if I were in LA, I'd make $7.50. Stuff like this. And but I was writing my novel, and I decided to go across one day. I don't know if she was officially my wife then, but I think she was, and she made me a couple burritos, and I had a Fanta orange, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go buy me a soda over there. And I had an appointment to see this this chair of English, because I'd been visiting with the first writer I'd ever met in my life. And she said, do you want to teach here? I'm like, what? And next thing I know, I was talking to this chair, and he, of course, thought I had a degree in English. But I did it for a semester. I got to meet Ray Carver. And, and I read him. I'd say, he's working class. I work working class. I actually work. I have nothing but stories about jobs. I've had jobs since I'm 13. And so I thought, well, then if that's what they want, I will write stories. And so I started doing that and working, raising, my second, we moved to LA so I could join the Carpenters Union, and I had Ricardo was born there. And so that's how my history, I got my first manuscript done. They rejected it because the good thing is I didn't know it was as terrible. Yeah, I think I tell people you have to believe it's not terrible for a few years. So you need that delusion to go on, because if they told you that if you believe the truth, it would wreck you. So I started writing stories because of Carver.
Right.
And then I figured I'll write a few stories. I'll get them published, and I'll publish my novel about Isla Vista, about the hippie and the black guy and the Chicano that starts the fire and IV. And yeah, it was a terrible book. Just terrible.
So is El Paso then basically where you form yourself as a writer?
It's it. It's funny. I always think, people go to graduate and they think, I'm going to go to New York or San Francisco. And I go, I'm going to El Paso. Like, I'm so brilliant. But, El Paso is sort of Ellis Island. It was where my mother said she was, where she was from, because she lied. She was from Mexico. It was just one of her many lies about everything.
So, I mean, being from LA, how did El Paso strike you?
Well, I was joking, said it's very East LA. You just get on I-10 and you go, and then pretty soon you're there. And everybody, there's Chicanos everywhere, and they don't even use the word Chicano. They're so pre-Chicano. No, and I loved it. I absolutely loved the border. I loved Juarez. I just absolutely fell in love with being there. And yeah, it is still my homeland. I did a thing that I lost, an essay I was writing about the death of Larry McMurtry. And where did I get the Western? I have no idea. I grew up in LA, but the LA I grew up was kind of rural, around Watts. If you've been to, I don't know now, it's been 200 years, but it was a lot of chaparral.
Yeah.
Around the railroad track. It was the Wild West. People in trains would shoot at me and a buddy because we'd throw rocks and stuff, and they'd shoot at us. I don't think they were using real bullets, but they would shoot at us. And it was fun. It was exciting, and that was the LA. So in El Paso, that's the entire city. And the entire city is a railroad track. And yeah, this is it. This is where I'm born. And, being from such a dysfunctional family, I thought, well, I am going to create our first family. It was me, Becky, Ricardo, and Antonio, and here we go. We're going to begin right here. So that's that's what happened.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about the book. Although I'm fascinated in this because it seems amazing to me that you're able to form that career, from El Paso. You're going to send your stories out,
I did send them out. Pretty good. I'd send them out and I'd write it in a little ledger, and most of the stories would get rejected like up to 20 times or so.
Sure, that's par for the course.
And one of my best stories, I think, how can I not down in the hole? I wrote this story. My first story was for Ray Carver. It was called Down in the West Texas Town. It's about a carpenter's group, a group of carpenters that were junkies. And I worked with them, and I knew the one guy. He was a little older than me, a Vietnam vet, junkie. And, so I just said, I'll write you a story about junkies. And I gave it to Carver. I said, what do you think? And he was like, how would you like to go to Iowa? Of course, I didn't have an idea what Iowa was. I tutored at UC Santa Barbara. I tutored Indians and Chicanos in remedial English. And I kept going, Kiowa, Kiowa. And the Kiowa were famous for when a woman was bad, they cut her nose off and celebrate the man who discovered she was a bad woman. That was the Kiowa way. And so I thought, Kiowas. And so, no, I'm already out of school, man. I don't want to go to school. What do you want? I want to be a writer. I thought you got out of school to be a writer. And yeah, little did I realize that was the way. I didn't have any clue that you went to school. I thought it was the opposite.
The new story collection, the New Testament, I think delves into something that I think your last story collection also got into, which I think is what I would call the power and the authority of memories. And I was wondering if you could talk about that, because I found myself reading some of these stories and closely identifying with your narrators as they question the veracity of their memories. Yet at the, where you swore that something actually was at this location and then maybe it wasn't at that location, yet at the same time, they sharply experience those memories. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
I'm not sure. I guess I'd have to have a story to be focused on it.
Well, let's
Yeah.
let's say like the story Wilshire and Grand.
Okay.
Where we're sort of like we realize we've lived this life, we've had these experiences, and things that you think you have a clear memory of maybe didn't happen where you thought they happened.
Right. Okay, I got you. That story, it's around my friend Danny Ochoa and me, because Danny was a carpenter. I have lots of Danny. Danny was a lot like my mom. My mom, I'd always say, when I'm really in trouble, I open the treasure chest and pull out one of the gold coins. And Danny was a lot like that, because Danny was nuts. He was a wild dude, Alexis Arguello, big and totally a dominant figure. But Danny was the carpenter. Even though I had the job, I literally had that job at Wilshire and Grand. And I had, a lot of the experience were mine, but I gave them all to my buddy Danny, so he would deal with it. And then Danny, who wasn't really in LA, but he did all the things that this character did in LA, but it wasn't really LA. So, and it was sort of his memory. Now, it is also when you go to LA, you don't know, was that once this, or was it there, or the Chinese place was there, or did I get that wrong? Or, back then, this, I guess it was the early 90s, even later 80s, I was at a job, the high rises in LA were just at the booming stage, which kept me employed a lot. And so you wouldn't know, you would work there and see this building just go, and then the things around it would just change. And that was a lot like Mexicanos lived, they would get a job here and then they'd be over there. And I don't know, it's just something about the nature of the life of a migrant in a way. And I was a migrant construction worker. I didn't live, at some points I would live in El Paso and I come 6 months to LA. And then I go back and get my unemployment writing grant and try to write stories, because I love stories so much better than novels. And so a lot of the memory, that what I would say, that's the nature of LA. Nothing is permanent there to me. And of course, I don't mean like now, but I meant the things get built, go away,
Right.
This appears and then goes away, or it moves down the street, or it moves up, or
Right. And then in the story, the two red foxes, there's also that sort of question of, where the narrator knows what he saw.
Right.
He saw two foxes.
right.
But everyone is telling him that's not possible. You
Right.
couldn't have possibly have seen that.
To me, that's about old age.
Yeah.
And when you start imagining, whatever it is, and your kids don't believe you, and you don't know whether you fabricated a history that you don't. Did I really? But here's the secret to that story. That actually happened to me. That's where I decided to write the story, because a fox appeared in front of my house and it stopped and it looked, and I was standing right where the guy does. And I thought I saw two. I don't know why I thought I saw two. It didn't make sense, but then this one fox just galloped off across the street. My street is not rural exactly in Austin. It went across the street, and it wasn't the last. I didn't even believe myself. Did I really see that? If I tell people that a fox just ran over there, will they believe me? I wouldn't believe me. I would say, oh, yeah, right. But in fact, not months later, I even have a picture of it. It was sleeping under my deck in my backyard. Or I don't know if it's exactly the same fox, but a fox was sleeping in my backyard. I have pictures of him, you know, sunbathing and splashing around some rainwater. So anyway, I like that as an image of the of old Chicanos. It's the old Chicano movement. Do we believe these guys? It's, you know, here are these two old Chicanos activists from the 60s, and here it is 2000 and in the teens or 20.
Right.
And what is a Chicano now? It's just these old guys remembering when they partied and you know, and now they're kids, and it's like, yeah, the movement. Chicano power. Look where we are now. I have a good friend always, hey, Chicano power. He's like lives in a dump in corporate. And this poor dude, and he was just such a good activist too. He really was. He knew everybody. Willie Varela was his best buddy, the sort of the Cesar Chavez of Texas. And here's my friend Mondo. He's an absolute worthless drunk living off his mother's house that he's, you know, it's anyway.
You know, it reminds me of the old was a Paul Gonzalez joke when Time magazine, I think they had Edward James Olmos on the cover, and it proclaimed the decade of the Latino. And I think his joke was the decade of Latino turned out to be a weekend sponsored by Bud. You know, it's like, yeah, that was very short. I wanted to, I mentioned earlier about the Great Cloud, and I wanted to come back to that really quickly because one of the things I think in your, not just in this collection, but in your stories in general, or sitting with mystery. One of the things I really enjoy about your characters, about the way you write, there's no omniscient narrator. There is no sort of secret knowledge about what people's motivations are, but rather I think reflects faithfully how we go through life, which is we're guessing. We're trying to not only sort out what our motivations are, but what are other people thinking, what are they really about, and what is it that they want from me, if anything. Now, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Well, I would say it's because what I am, and still I always was, what I was fascinated with, why I studied religion and philosophy is that I was always trying to find out, you know, like nirvana, but the mystery, I call it. And the mystery just, you know, here we are right now. What the hell are we doing this for? And that is the mystery. We live in, every once in a while we go, we're on Earth, and what the hell are we doing? And that's what I obsess on. I am obsessed. So every story is about that. Is like, so you don't, you know, what commercial fiction does is, you know, you sort of hide or you bury facts and you bring them out later as they go. So if a character is going thump, thump, the thump, the thump, you don't tell the reader he has a peg leg. And I say, no, tell the reader he has a peg leg immediately. That isn't the end of the story. Oh, you mean it was a peg leg? Oh, and if you watch movies, that's all they do. They withhold the information and they play with you. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was that. Oh, of course that sound is a peg leg. And so he wasn't just some murderer or whatever. It was, he just lost anyway. And though to me, we are all good writing is a mystery novel. Where's the dead body? What happens to the dead body? Where does it go? All these sort of things, or what are we doing? We're all dust. But what are we doing right now here? And what we are doing, it seems like often we get glimpses, we see a flower and, oh, something happens. We see art, a great painting, you know, if you go see a Van Gogh and you stand next to it and you go, holy shit, that is really good. When you go see a painting in J.C. Penney's, it's like, oh, that color would really go good with my bedspread. And you know, art is what is chasing the mystery. And somehow that mystery, which is how our, I'm sorry to bring up all these things, but it's how our soul grows. That's what I think. And, you know, my education is, I read all the greats. I mean, every one of them. That was my thing to read. St. John of the Cross, all, you know, you name it, I read it. And so I do that in what I think my stories are parables of working people, of in the Blue Cloud. Not to give, I don't think I can't give this story away. The question is, why do we die? And so the mother there is like, she thinks we're dying because of the gray cloud. My friend Annie Proulx, when she read that, and you need to talk about Sarko and da 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 da. And she got me connected with this guy who did photographs of the Sarko, and I'm like, hey, I don't know if it's a Sarko. It doesn't matter. We're gonna die. And she was consumed like a priest with, what do we do to live well? And that's her whole story. That's the whole story of them. And then when they die, she's thinking, when people die, and her argument would be, the gray cloud did it. And is that why we die? We have all a version of this cloud, and we're dying because we happen to get in that cloud. It probably did happen to some people that got in a horrible toxic cloud, and it was a horrible toxic cloud, and you know, all that, but that wasn't the mother. I mean, it's also because in the book, I'm trying to change the paradigm of Chicano lit, that we're not just immigrants, we're not just invaders, we're not just cholos, we're not just, you know, this and that. We're actually human beings with our own things. And she, in a lot of ways, which in Mexico is very much happening, especially in Mexico City, they're sort of going through a hippie movement. The best of the hippie, healthy food, you know, all these, you know, making beautiful candles and all the things that are going on. And in a lot of ways, this mother, she transforms. She says, we can't eat this way anymore. I have to make corn tortillas. I have to learn. And anybody that lives in El Paso knows they have some of the best flour tortillas you've ever had. And but the fluffier the flour tortilla is, the fatter and the more lard that is in it. And you're not going to come out well. It ain't going to turn out well. So the mother becomes aware and teaches her quirky daughters about, no, we're going to eat better. You have to eat less meat. We have to do this. And that's what the story is about, this unique family in El Paso changing the paradigm, because the mother, her family was in a toxic cloud, and she isn't going to live the same anymore. And that's what that when we convert to things, myself, I converted, you know, I was early in my life, like I thought Marxism was the answer because I'd had so many shitty bosses and bad pay. And I did think the working class was abused and fuck you guys and all that stuff. And, you know, I sort of altered when I met my first Trotskyites and said, fuck you guys. I don't like you jerks. I don't want you running me either. So anyway, and she just changed her world. And I've heard, yeah.
Yes, I was going to say that that's wonderful.
So usually it takes a second or two. thoughts to form. There we go.
Could you tell us your Larry McMurtry story?
Oh, it's funny. I don't know if this is the story you're looking at, but I know his son, James McMurtry. And so, and this is a quirky, but anyway, I'll just tell it because it's my favorite Larry McMurtry story. And there was my son knows the place real well, a Mexican restaurant called Curas. So James and his wife say, hey, my dad's in town, come and let's go have dinner. So the two of them and Larry and me, we go to Curas. Curas is, I know the owners really well. So I virtually in my kitchen most of the time. So we go there and, you have this person kind of sniffing around the sides, celebrity, you can just feel, and of course I'm with Larry McMurtry and I'm thinking, oh yeah, of course they want to, say hi to me, Larry or something. And, I think he thinks it. I think James is thinking, is it for me? Because he's a well-known singer. And the guy of all things comes up to me. Are you Dagoberto Gilb? And it was like, I looked at Larry and it was all I could do was like, oh my God, that's the stupidest thing I've ever been asked. That is hilarious. And yeah, that's my favorite Larry McMurtry. It was like, it made our evening that he didn't know it was Larry McMurtry, but he knew it was me. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, that's my favorite. The story about that I was writing the essay about Larry is how his films, I really loved his films. HUD, all that, those books were good, just downright, and it wasn't my world, but really a lot of those characters were Mexicanos. They could be Mexicanos right now. And living in the country and, having to shoot cattle and all the things that you go through, that was Larry's world. Now he was, a different, God, prolific and different, a whole different, I don't know how you get that way, so confident, and he was. So anyway, so the essay was about how in the world could I have been kind of feeling like I'm from the West. I'm from the West and I write from the West. It's a terrible story. I was asked because it was a eulogy about it. And I was I was in Mexico and my computer crashed. I had one more day to go. I was just on the end of the essay and I was going to get a grant from a magazine that wanted it. I hadn't sent it to anybody, but stupidly, I didn't back up my computer. I don't know why I was doing that. And it crashed and it has disappeared. And another story that's in New Testaments was also, but I had mailed it to this, it's called a public space. They had the finished product. I have none of the drafts because I was living in this particular place. And the two things I just started on were first that story. And then I was writing a Larry essay, which was good. And I thought, oh, I'll get it back. And I spent I'll take, that hard drive. So, and nope, it's totally gone unless I spend like $3,000 and maybe it won't be there either. So I didn't have it and don't, anyway, that's it. But Larry, when you live in Austin, it's a lot like living in Texas, which is one of the things I must say I like, is sort of like living in LA, except it's Texas. It's also like living in Mexico. There's only like a dozen pretty well-known writers, a dozen. It's not like being in New York. In Texas, I'm in the canon, me and Larry. I'm in there. I'm with a lot of really writers I love. And I'm, you go to restaurants and my picture is in a restaurant of, famous writers of Texas. So yeah, that's my Larry stuff. And he's big and obviously one of the major writers, sort of the most major writer of Texas is J. Frank Dobie. And who is a fun thing. He's a fun guy to read. Rattlesnakes is really a good book. And but he was a professor at UT. And yeah, anyway, that's Larry.
Anyone else?
Oh, okay. Good.
Do I need this? I can talk pretty loud. I just wanted to talk to you about teaching, because what I remember when I first met you and we went around the Bay Area and we went to
Yeah.
these bookstores,
I love
people would
these, by the
come
way.
and they would, they would be in awe of you. And you could always tell who was a writer, like a young writer. And you would always go, hey, what's your story? Hey, what's your story? And I loved that. It almost makes me cry to think about it, because they had a story, and they wanted to write.
Everybody wants to
And
tell that story too.
you are the Ray Carver to a lot of young writers. And I just wonder what your teaching experience was like. And also to say that I remember at that time you said, have you ever read A Foot in the Field of Men?
Yes.
Pat Taylor, you got to read this. Her name is Pat, little dog now.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I never heard of it. And you were like, I'll send it to you. And I was like, yeah, there's no way he's going to send that book to
I
me.
did it.
And
Oh, I'm
he
so proud of
totally
me.
did.
Very proud. She is totally a Jack Kerouac, a Kerouac, but a woman. She was always stoned. It was very uncomfortable. She was a grandmother smoking in front of her kids in a box. And I'm like, you go over there and I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I can't get high with your grandkids. And yeah, it just sort of the kooky, it's Sandra Cisneros is my friend. I would introduce her, we'd go over and I'm like, this is our crazy white friend. Let's go see her. And, and she lived in what I call the hillbillies. And so when I was teaching, had a good job, I would always, Tim O'Brien was also a friend, and he was in Austin teaching where I did, and Tim's a good buddy. And so 2 field trips would be to go to Tim O'Brien's mansion. And, Tim would have a party for the creative writing faculty, the students. And, they see how a famous, the most famous war writer in America, probably one of the top 5 in the country. And then we go to Pat Little Dogs, the hillbillies. And so I'd say, and this is the opposite world. Let's just see the world where you make $10 selling a poem. And how she lives, it's, it's almost impossible to describe how she lives with her family there. One son works at a strip joint, and it goes on. It's just unbelievable but a fabulous writer, a fabulous person from El Paso. And so she was always a close friend of my big brother was a poet named Ricardo Sanchez. And Ricardo was the first Chicano in America to get a book published in New York. And Ricardo was a character too. And so me, Ricardo, and Pat, and one time when Rick was young, Pat was trying to write a book. It was called, what was it called? The Marijuana Stories or something. It was worse than that. The marijuana people of Texas. It was just ridiculous. Absolutely a ridiculous title and a ridiculous subject, but that's what she did. And I said, well, Pat, we'll fix up the garage and you can stay there as long as you need. And we did that. I think Ricardo remembers when Pat would come and she'd play her accordion. It was just so weird. And I'm like, how's it going? I want to see this book. But anyway, yeah. Now my teaching, I don't want to dwell on it too long, but the teaching in Texas, I got fired just recently. I got fired. Why? I mean, it's hard for me to explain. I have no idea because I don't understand, but I had tenure and I had a really good job. I mean, I signed to go to this. Instead of going to a top 5% school, I was offered those jobs. I said, oh, I don't want to go teach rich kids. I don't know everything about writing. I can't read everybody's and tell you what to do. I have trouble with creative writing in that respect. Like, I don't know what you should do with your stuff. It seems good, but there's a lot that I read that seems good and has nothing to do with me. I don't know where you should go. And so I decided I'd go to a bottom 5%, where it was 75% Chicanos, Mexican American students, and 20% Black, and 5% other, which didn't mean white. It meant Arab. It was mostly, and I thought, well, this is perfect. They offered me the perfect job where I ran a center. And at some point, some Trump people there decided that I was getting away with shit. Because I published Zyzzyva, which was, what's that garbage? What is a Latino magazine? It was the best Latino magazine that's ever been produced. It's gorgeous. But, you know, we're talking, when you go to a school that's 75% Mexican American, it turns out that it's 99% white right-wing jerks, idiots. And I thought, oh, I can rise above it. I signed a contract, I'm all good. But turns out in Texas, no contracts exist with the state of Texas, because like dictatorships, they don't honor contracts. So 7 years later, I was fired, and I was fired at the end of December. I kept thinking, you guys, my son even defended me at some point, and he got to see, because it's hard for people. I'm always thinking, I bet people think how do I say this without being vulgar? I pulled my thingy out, or did I grab a student's boob? What did I do really? And I didn't do anything. You can't believe the charges that were against me. So I was supposed to start teaching freshman composition or leave. And I said, that's not why you think I would leave, where Tim O'Brien on an MFA, which was a top 5% MFA program in the country, and I wanted to go away and do a magazine and do these things it was all Mexican in Texas. And I lost. It didn't matter. I lost my tenure even. I didn't even think that could happen, but it did, and here I am. So that's what happened. I used to, so you tell me what that means. I don't know. I know if it was Sandra, my sister, they would scream to the heavens. Nothing like that would happen, but I guess they're not scared of whatever. Nobody screamed. I couldn't believe that of all the places that had a bad reputation for treating Mexican Americans, but I guess it's a new time. And so it didn't matter. And here I am. I'm fine. I didn't care. Had they just waited, I would have quit 5 years ago. I was writing a novel, and then I got this news, you're going to have to do this from now on. 2 weeks from now, you have to do this. And I said, F you, I'm getting a lawyer. And it ruined my novel, of course. I didn't write the damn thing. I had to spend 3 months finding a lawyer, which they don't exist in Texas either. Because there is no employment laws, and there is no, since there's no contracts, there's no, UT. But anyway, there's the answer. I had a lot of good students. A lot of my students published, some of the better writers, and I think I had like 6, 7 well-published writers that have worked with me and are my friends and studied with me. So I'm proud of that.
So I got some questions from online. Marilyn asks, what do the story endings in this collection mean to you? How do you go about constructing them?
That's a good creative writing question. I usually begin with the ending. When I know an ending, not the actual words, I have a vision of the ending, where I'm going. And so the way I construct any fiction is, where does this begin? And that's when I work And most of my time is on that first page, trying to, start the story that includes what should be the end, so that when they're done, I didn't withhold any information, things like that. So I generally know what the end is going to. I don't know how I'll write it. And as Elaine knows, I tinker with the end endlessly. I'm constantly like, oh, I think I need this. I think I should cut. The last 2-3 lines are always like the words themselves I'm playing around, but that was where I was going all along.
So we have another question, this one from Rob. Hi, good to see you after so many years. University of Texas, Austin, late 80s.
Okay, I remember.
I loved Answer from New Testaments. One thing struck me, you always seem to have a great economy of words, not a long Kerouac sentence, not a short Hemingway sentence, but it seems like you have exactly the right number of words to tell your story. Do you self-edit to get that result, or do you get this economy on the first try?
Well, it's the first try. It's a lot of editing as I go. The computer has been one of the greatest things because I scroll. But I also, there's a computer program. I just write it perfectly and I hit it and boom. No, anyway, I work hard at it. It's like, I'll spend, it depends on what the story, but all I can say is thank you, Rob. I mean, I work hard at it and mean to. And I think stories, I can't call them short stories because to me, that's novelists describing what I do. We write novels. Nobody says they write long stories. I think they're ponderous and long most of the time. And they need to cut a lot of shit and, give it up to TV and movies. Movies do a lot. I carry it. I concern myself. It's not about the gun going off. It's about the holding the gun in your hand, feeling the grip in your hand, feeling your finger on the trigger. And it isn't the murder. It's the weight of the gun. And so what I like in fiction is what poets like. I don't care about the plots. I care about the image, the things that can't be said, that there are no words to, that the words that I use are pointing to things that are wordless. And that's my idea of writing is, and short stories say huge things to me. I had somebody tell me your stories are like novels, and actually I don't want to say it, but yeah, I kind of feel like I have big things in my stories that I think are there, but I do it like a great poem. It was one of the things I learned I flunked the first time I took an English lit class in college, in junior college. And, but I took another class and I remember this guy, now I don't remember the name of the poem. It's a war poem, World War II. I'm sure it's the most famous poem in Asia, showing everybody how ignorant I am. But he said, this poem is the essence of World War I. It was just one page. And it was, I still think, I haven't heard anything about World War I that wasn't contained in those 25 to 35 lines. And that's what I think stories are. They are condensations of big ideas. And the more I can condense them, like I think of a paragraph and I think, I grab it. And if it's not good, words pop out. I squeeze it and they just jump out. But when it's really done, you can't move that damn thing. And that's what I think a story is. There are big, big stories about big issues.
I think this is as good a place as any to cap the evening off. Do you want to take us out, Oscar?
Oh, just well, thank you so much, Dagoberto Gilb, for this evening, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It looks like you have all of Dago's work available. Please, buy a copy. As you just heard, he no longer has tenure.
I'm in the Wild West now.
Yes, absolutely. And again, in Dago, as always, it's a pleasure to see you. I've known you for so long.
Yeah,
And
this guy is the only Chicano in the literary business, the literary critic business. It's so amazing and sad at the same time.
no, there's others for sure. There's others for sure, but I might be the oldest. But again, thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, next comment. Read, big fan of residents. I read that with Leonard Gardner. Yeah,
I love him. Oh, why you tell him I love him?
I read that book. I'm trying to I read one of this book. There was something in it that had the same vibe about.
I have one of my good friends was a guy named Rick.
Yeah, I don't know.
And he loved him and he introduced me to that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, he wrote that one book. What's the name of it?
That's it.
Yeah. And it's great.
Oh,
okay.
Fine, right.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. And tell him I said hi.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.